Around 3 years ago, I came across this humble 6-second video in my recommended page.
That's a nice argument, Senator. Why don't you back it up with a source?
My source is that I made it the fuck up.
I swear this is relevant because I have this to thank for leading me towards my newest obsession. One way or another, this video sent me down the path toward discovering ULTRAKILL. Buying ULTRAKILL on Steam has been one of the best decisions I've ever made. As of the time I'm writing the script, it's my second favorite video game, but I really can't add anything to the conversation besides comparing my favorite levels in it and Super Monkey Ball Banana Blitz. That's a story for another time though, because while browsing content surrounding the game, I eventually came upon this image. So anyway, Murder Drones is the most fun I've had with any television series since Avatar. Murder Drones is an 8-episode series written by Liam Vickers, produced by the guys behind SMG4, and available to watch for free on YouTube. It's also on Prime, but the supplementary material on Prime spoils a bit too much for me to recommend it for your first viewing. If you haven't seen the show, I'd recommend waiting to watch this video until you have. It's 100% worth experiencing as blind as possible, and I'd recommend trying to pay attention to every background detail. The puzzle pieces do fit together, I promise. There's a lot to cover regarding this show's surprisingly deep lore and characters, but before then, I think I'll go over the technical aspects of the show. In other words, first on the chopping block is... presentation! Murder Drones animation grew up as the series progressed. The pilot already looked a lot better than any of Glitch's previous shows, but Episode 2 showed significant improvement over even that. The show's visuals kept getting better and better, with Episodes 7 and 8 being some of the most beautiful animation I've ever had the pleasure of viewing. When it comes to the show as a whole, I love the aesthetic, I love the character designs, and the action scenes are peak, especially in those last 2 episodes. I'd also like to specifically shout out the effects surrounding the solver, particularly when used by Dull. They really came across as editing the real world, which was, I think, the intention given what the solver is. But I'll get to that later. Now, music. DiSpirito did a great job with the soundtrack for all 8 episodes. The music didn't really command my attention on any of my watches of the series, but it worked just fine in the background and there were literally no songs I didn't find fitting for the situation. It was certainly immersive, and the few times the music did take the foreground were moments to remember. The Knife Dance, Eternal Dream, Bite Me, Forever, and my personal favorite, Eternal Destroyer, let's freaking go! On the topic of audio, every single member of the cast is giving it their all, and the results show. Elsie Lovelock gives an excellent performance to anchor the show as her emo grape. Michael Kovac kills it as always. Nola Klopp perfectly embodies every aspect of V. Shira Kirby does a great job as Jay. Emma Breezy's Russian voice definitely fooled me. David Dixon sells Con at every point in his arc. Darcy McGuire makes the most of her limited screen time with one of the funniest roles in the show. Caitlin Dizzen is honestly my pick for this show's second best vocal performance with her work as Lizzie, and holy crap, Thad and King are voiced by the same guy. In short, the show looks good and gets better as it keeps going and sounds great. Alright, I've put this off long enough, it's time to talk about her emo grape. My favorite part of Murder Drones is just seeing these characters interact. I love the atmosphere and I love decoding the mysteries of the show, which we'll get to, but this is what I'm here for.
Anyway, that's why my project is this sick as hell railgun!
So not the vibe!
I'll start with Uzi, who's probably my third favorite character across this show's excellent cast. A lot of her initial motivation is tied to the scrap plans for her father, and her main character arc of not doing everything alone is mostly over by the 3rd episode. It's still a great arc though, and how it's resolved in episode 3 is one of the series' best scenes for me. Past that point, a lot of her conflict comes from external sources, which comes to a head in the final 2 episodes, with her taking ownership of her own consciousness twice. I like both of these scenes, especially since it gives rise to probably my second favorite line in the show.
No one traumatizes these weirdly hot robots but me!
Peak Uzi writing has to be episode 3, but I'd also like to call attention to episode 4, for bringing her to a lowest point and then bringing her up again, quite literally. Falling for You, while not quite as good a scene as its successor, still does a lot for her. I also like how she's written in episode 7 for similar reasons as I mentioned before. From the outside looking in, Uzi Doorman is a main character whose main arc is over with before the show's halfway point, and who spends the rest of the show dealing with the same external conflict repeatedly. I won't deny this, but I still love her. The main reason she's up there in terms of my favorite characters honestly just comes down to vibes. That's not the full story for the rest of the podium, but I'll get to that later.
So, how do we... Can her hands be guns?
Kick also.
Lizzie and Thad were both fun, but didn't have much to do. Thad subverted my expectations by not being an asshole, while Lizzie had a fun dynamic with one member of the main cast I'll get to. I have a feeling Thad played a much larger role in some initial drafts based on his early interactions with Uzi. Lizzie, on the other hand, clearly had her role expanded following the pilot. I really wish they had more to do in the finale, though. Lizzie's main contribution wasn't shown, and Thad didn't really do anything besides tossing Uzi the railgun.
Call her damaged again, and I will install a door on your face!
After the pilot script, which still clearly felt the aftershock of Con Doorman's initial plans to be the main villain of the series, the writing backpedaled on him hard, but I'm happy with how he turned out. From the initial moment of him prioritizing comforting Uzi over taking charge of the situation in Episode 2, to opening up about the Cabin Fever Lab's aftermath at the start of Episode 4, to rebuilding Uzi's railgun and marshalling Thad and Lizzie in preparation for the end times, giving us this banger of a quote in the process.
If my wife's closet is right, the planet's gonna try to eat us soon.
To literally saving Best Boy's life in the finale by doing exactly what Thad told him to do in Episode 1, defend, Con Doorman had the most surprising arc of the show.
You don't know me and I hate you!
As for Nori, I figured out it was her pretty quickly and yeah, she's funny. Liked her conversation with Uzi in the finale. Doll, aside from being a great episode antagonist in The Promining, is a really compelling recurring face throughout the rest of the show. Her best line definitely goes to...
Ой, я должна была предположить, что кто-то сможет убежать через вентиляцию, используя выброшенное зеркало как ступеньки.
I'd consider her the foil to Uzi, having a similar origin story but actively choosing to try and solve her problems alone. I am forced to question her actions in Episode 6, the one time I'd really say she acted out of character and a blemish on that entire episode, but maybe she just really wanted V dead. Whatever the case, she's the centerpiece of some of my favorite scenes in Episodes 3 and 7, and despite how she went out, I'd still like to see her return in some capacity.
Synergistic liability here must have tripped and knocked himself offline.
After her stint as the narcissistic main villain of Episode 1, Jay really took a backseat for the entire rest of the show. I like the motivations that Episode 8 established, with Jay being too much of a coward to break away after she'd already died and come back to life at least once. It's an understandable motivation for her choices that gave her a lot of room to grow, but she's shuffled offstage early into the final battle sequence and only gets one more shot for the rest of the show in the credits. I'm looking forward to seeing more from her in Unresolved, but as is, she's my least favorite major character. In addition to being the smartest horror protagonist this side of Derek Hutchins, N is unquestionably Best Boy and I would do anything to protect his smile. At first glance, he's not the most complicated character, and that remains true at second or even third glance. Honestly, his character arc isn't the most complicated, but I do like it. His growth is all about taking initiative and taking control of his life. It's set up in the background for most of the show, but pays itself off near the end of Episode 7 with undoubtedly his most badass moment. And then follows it up in the finale by finally achieving his dream as spaceship pilot and getting Uzi to the planet to kick off the final battle, where he saves her life at least once. Besides his subtle growth throughout the show, he's just friggin' adorable. I love that apology card he draws in Episode 2, I love his insistence on being dapper in Episode 3, this scene in Episode 4 is without doubt the funniest one in the series for me, and of course we can't forget about Spaceship Pilot! I wish him good luck in his artistic journey, though honestly he's already good enough. He's not quite on the podium for my favorite characters though, and that's because of serial designation V-X00100000. V took me a while to crack. She had quite the introduction.
Please stop beating my own eggshells in front of my family!
And yet, I still feel nothing.
And her manic sadism, along with other reasons, kept me interested in her for long enough to start seeing through her facade. Episode 4 is really where the cracks started to show regarding a dialogue with Manic Uzi, and in the next 2 episodes, we saw her gradually break down more and more, warming up to both Uzi and N, concluding her arc with a finale of Episode 6, which needs no introduction. Despite what happens in Episode 8, I'd say Dead End is where her arc finishes. Her appearances in Absolute End and Fight Till I'm Good Enough are her as a fully realized character without any facades up. It's not the show alone that makes V my second favorite character in the series, however, as her best appearance to date is, of course, in Intermission. Quick sidebar. If you're recommending this show to someone else and wondering when they should watch Intermission, or if you're somehow this far into the video and haven't seen the show, I'd say to watch it after all 8 episodes. There's some content in Intermission that counts as spoilers for Dead End, and I'd really rather not emotionally manipulate blind viewers by having them watch it right before Absolute End. Back to the topic, however, Intermission codifies the central conflict within V that was always there in the show, but never brought to the foreground. Her need to put up a facade of sadism to run away from the realities of what happened to her. Especially with the constant external pressures put on her, she felt the need to keep N in the dark, to continue to slaughter worker drones, and most crucially, to never think about what she's become. After all,
why even care when you can just destroy?
Of course, she does break free of this by the end of the show, leading to one hell of an epic fight scene with Jay where she officially leaves behind all her masks. As is, she's cleanly integrated into the main cast, and I'm overjoyed to see how the character that got me into the series ended up. Now I've set Uzi as my 3rd favorite character and V's my 2nd, but that leaves a podium placement open. I won't reveal it just yet, it's such a mystery! Which actually leads us perfectly into... Murder Drones hides a lot in its background details while simultaneously throwing new concepts at you every episode. I call this the main flaw of the show, honestly. Even for me, this was too much information to keep up with. From Eldritch J in Episode 2, to everything surrounding Doll in Episode 3, to Cabin Fever Labs in Episode 4, to literally the entirety of Episode 5, to the Sentinels, rest in peace Pomni, and Alice in Episode 6, to the Cathedral and Crucifix patch in Episode 7, it was just a bit too much to wrap my head around all at once, at first. I did, however, manage to think I'd figure things out by the time I'd started each episode. That leads us perfectly into what I'm doing with this section because I lied to you. This is actually me reviewing each episode with mystery discussion sprinkled between each review. My standing on the pilot is that I put it right around the middle. It's probably my most rewatched episode, but I've noticed throughout those rewatches that the exposition is delivered a bit clunkily. It's at least funny though, and that makes up for it. I especially like the Meet the Team scene that Liam posted to his own channel in advance of the pilot's release. The fight scenes, while not at the level future episodes would reach, are just solid and consistently good, setting a pretty high bar. The central cast might be at its best in this episode, though I give that distinction to another episode. Despite it all, I still really like the pilot. It obviously gave me more than enough to work with for me to continue watching the show. I'd say the 2 central mysteries that were set up in the pilot are why the disassembly drones are here, and Uzi's situation. I noticed the yellow flash in her eye at the end of the episode, and at the time, I took it as a sign that she was becoming like the murder drones, potentially infected by them. Whatever the case, I kept watching. Heartbeat is, in my opinion, the weakest episode of the show, but I still think it's alright. It's just let down by not delivering on some promises the pilot made, and by its voice acting being the worst of all 8 episodes for reasons I'll get into later. The revenge plot against humanity is thrown out the window pretty quickly by the pilot's conflict being followed up in a different way, specifically through Eldritch J. The fight with her isn't the most interesting mechanically, but it does raise some horrifying questions about the nature of the disassembly drones, which Uzi immediately brings up following the fight's conclusion. This does, unfortunately, come at the cost of blowing up the sick as hell railgun that was such a driving force in the pilot. The episode ends with Doll's proper introduction, leading into The Promenading, which is the fan-favorite episode for a very good reason. Not only does it have the tightest and least flawed script of the show, with something always pushing the plot forward toward its inevitable and amazing climax, but the characters are honestly at their best in this episode in my opinion. Uzi gets to reunite with N in probably my favorite scene involving either of them. We get to spend time with the disassembly drones separate from Uzi, leading to easily my favorite scene from V across the first 7 episodes of the show. In retrospect, I understand both of them so much here. Everything Doll does lines up with either her laser-focused motive of killing V, or the lack of concern for collateral damage caused by her problems, and even Lizzie gets a small arc in the background, ultimately choosing to not back the drone that killed her entire grade. This leads into the knife dance, which even divorced from nostalgia, is my favorite action sequence in the series. The choreography, music, visuals, the personalities of each character shining through, new questions being presented as the scene goes on, and that music sync is just unreal. It all comes together for something truly special. The Promenading is a great time and I always have a lot of fun rewatching it. It's my 2nd favorite episode for many reasons, but the biggest bombshell actually comes at the very end of the episode. Now at this point, I'd already noticed Dull's systems flagging Uzi as like object non-interactive during the knife dance, so I was anticipating something like this to happen. Her having the same powers as Dull, though, was unexpected to say the least. Given what we've seen Dull go through and what she said to Uzi following this reveal, I started to become very worried about exactly what was going on with Uzi. Cabin Fever has notable flaws, but also hits some pretty high heights. On the lower end of things, the way this episode treats the deaths of its minor characters, rest in peace Emily, you were amazing, is a pretty glaring flaw with the episode. It's also paced a bit slow at times, and the recurring joke about Uzi not being noticed kinda doesn't make any sense, but when this episode hits, it hits hard. And it all leads back to this episode's greatest asset, Manic Uzi. This has been foreshadowed in the previous episode, and it comes to a head here, with Uzi going on a serious rampage, killing half the class in the process, and coming 1 second away from succeeding where Dull had failed. Despite N being able to calm her down, this was still a shocking revelation that does, at least, partially spell out what both Uzi and Dull were dealing with. Uzi's psychosis is shown to originate from her overheating, the exact same problem the disassembly drones have, and probably something Dull's also been dealing with judging by the state of her room. Over the past 2 episodes, Uzi's situation has been moved to the foreground, with the disassembly drone's origin being less of a priority. Home, though, marks a shift. Questions start being answered rather than posed. The downside is that Home's concept, Uzi hijacking a flashback in order to get answers, doesn't really work as a concept, leading to it being my second least favorite episode of the show. It's not just that, the pacing is still off in this one, but it's got more upsides than Heartbeat in my opinion, most relating to one specific character. After 2 episodes of Uzi-centric content, Home swings in the exact opposite direction, spelling out almost everything about the disassembly drone's origin, while providing literally no answers to the questions raised about Uzi. Thankfully, the episode does end on the exact right note, tossing us right into the final act of the show, comprising the last 3 episodes. Dead End is the episode I rewatched the least. They gave me both answers and questions, making for an alright time. On the answers front, Alice, who's otherwise my least favorite character in the series, finally let the audience know that Uzi had inherited her powers from her mother. We also got a good look at Earth, but also got a new question asked in the form of this screen from the perspective of a Sentinel. After bearing witness to Eternal Dream and finishing Dead End, I wasn't sure what to think. I was worried for Uzi's sake, as she'd straight up failed to hold herself together by the end of the episode. I could tell, heading into Mass Destruction, that there would be a moment when she lost herself fully. Mass Destruction is a top 3 episode of the series for me, for so many reasons. We've got Nori turning the pace up to 11 every time she interacts with another character, with more quips per minute than anybody else in the show by a landslide. We've got Khan finally rebuilding the sick-as-hell railgun and even improving it in preparation for the end times. We've got further revelations about the aftermath of the gala. And, of course, we have my pick for this series' 3rd best action sequence, with the best animation out of any of them, and charged with drama the entire way through. After this, though, we finally get the payoff to everything that's been built up regarding the only major character whose scenes I've been dancing around this entire time. So, let's talk about Tessa Elliott. After being shown flashes of her in episodes 2 and 3, Tessa is properly introduced in episode 5 and basically acts as its main character. About half of it is dedicated to her deserving a better childhood, with her time in the episode coming to an end following the start of the gala. She follows this up by hard carrying episode 6, revealing the fate of Earth and setting up the notion that Uzi might need to be put out of her misery back to back, while still providing comedy as needed. Episode 7, though, pulled the rug out from under my feet regarding her. There were already signs that something was wrong between the error messages shown by the Sentinels and her attitude toward drones not lining up at all with the characterization in flashbacks. In Mass Destruction, though, she starts by blowing up all the data on the Cabin Fever Labs drones and follows it up by this line to end her conversation with Doll.
Not sure it needs you, buddy.
In retrospect, I should have seen it coming. Between all these hints, Tessa being marked as like object non-interactive, Nori asking N which one was just trying to eat them, and Tessa's actions toward Uzi right before getting decapitated to close N's character arc, I should have figured it out. I couldn't reconcile that with Tessa being a human though, as was explicitly proven, and so I ultimately thought that, for whatever reason, Tessa had chosen to defect, and that the final battle would be against Uzi as the last few episodes had built up. Instead, once Uzi regains control, probably a combination of her building up a resistance and her emo instincts being literally unstoppable, we get the proper introduction of my favorite character in Murder Drones. Someone who's been built up since the pilot, getting 3 cameo appearances. Someone who we first saw a glimpse of at the very start of Episode 2. Someone who appeared in the flesh and was named in Episode 4. Someone who was the main focus of Episode 5. Someone who has been driving the main conflict in both Dead End and Mass Destruction, and indeed the entire show. The source of Uzi's problems. The creator of the disassembly drones. And a nightmare more horrifying than anything I could have ever foreseen. Delivering my favorite line of the entire show, after almost 7 episodes of the humans only being shown as silhouettes or in protective gear, we are finally shown one in stark, inevitable detail.
Oh yes, get snuck upon.
I said that the 6-second clip I showed at the start of the video led me to my newest obsession. That's not Murder Drones as a whole. There's a lot I love about the show, but it also has Rachel in it, which drags the entire thing down. Sin, though? Sin is my favorite character in fiction. It's taken me a while to realize that, but I think my channel content speaks for itself. I threw Sin into a Hunger Games simulator twice in one round, and she almost won. I had her make a cameo through my Gmail in my Fargo Souls DLC video. She hijacked my streams of Pokemon Radical Red. Literally every part of my Pokemon Reborn video besides the intro, Glass Gauntlet, and Elite Four was canonically narrated by her. Have you seen the title of this video? Yeah, I'm a pretty big fan of this autistic, psychopathic, eldritch, genocidal goober robot that's wearing a child skin. Sin, frankly, is the perfect villain for a show that revels in violence as much as this. Her design goes from quite adorable in the manner, although spooky snake crab notwithstanding, to nothing short of horrifying when she takes off the spacesuit, which is the same drone body, by the way! Still kinda adorable, though. I love the way her movements are portrayed, especially relative to the rest of the cast. The way she moves in both forms is quite jerky and almost overly fluid, which both speaks to her otherworldly nature and has its grounds in how we know she originated. The original Sin was improperly disposed of by the Elliots, buried under a mountain of other drones, and eventually lost odds of less than 1 in a million to reboot as a zombie drone with a dangerous mutation. The absolute solver, who we see for a few frames, needed permission to be let into Sin. I won't dive into the question surrounding how much of what we see is the solver and how much is Sin, as that's beyond my scope and I use the names interchangeably anyway. What I will say, however, is that I think the way Sin moves is a direct result of her joints being crushed by the drones buried on top of her. As for the way she talks, well, Alana Fitzgerald delivers, by far, my favorite performance of the show. Eldritch J's lines in Episode 2 were made before her voice had been fully figured out, but by the time Maid Sin had her proper introduction in Episode 5...
Perhaps you'd like to attend the gala with me. Light sip.
When I watched this, I thought a lot more filters had been applied to Fitzy's voice, or even that text-to-speech had been used, but just take a listen.
Annoyed expression. Annoyed expression.
Do I even need to explain any further? This kind of performance separates Sin from every other robot in the cast, with several implications that include everything from being puppeted by an outside force, to having a damaged vocal interface because of the aforementioned mountain of drones. Whatever it might be, every single line that comes out of Sin from Episode 5 onward is absolute gold.
We can no longer be thrown out. You will not have to discard your pets, and I will not discard you.
Single
Don't mind me.
one.
It's been fun, and also, that's sarcasm. Honestly, I'm starving.
In terms of her personality, that's the biggest contributor to her being a perfect villain for this show. She's the exact right combination of laser focus on her goals when she feels she needs to be, treating everything like a game, and simultaneously having the power to back it up. She's by far the most powerful character in the show, with only Uzi getting even remotely close, and mostly uses that level of power just to screw with the other drones. I went over this during their own character segments, but Sim manipulated V and J for years during and after the destruction of Earth, keeping them in line with threats of intervention from her, and with the knowledge that they couldn't escape her, for no other reason than her taking pleasure in it. She didn't need the help. I've mentioned Sin's usual voice already, but as evidenced by more than just Tessa, she can imitate anyone's voice effortlessly, in addition to projecting images that range from obvious fakes to completely realistic bodies and objects that other drones can actually touch. I don't even want to know how that works. Tessa's the obvious example, with their two voices actually being blended together during Sin's reveal, but she also imitated V earlier in the episode, again for no other purpose than to screw with N. There's also the entire fiasco with Eldritch J and everyone Sin imitated then, where she had more than enough matter to repair Jay's body, but still stuck around both to have a shot at taking Uzi out and, I suspect, to try and drive a rift between Uzi and N. Sin, in general, waited an unnecessarily long time to try and eat Copper 9, only doing it once the Crucifix, Patch, and Doll were both destroyed. No idea how Uzi got out of the core, by the way. Did she get blasted that entire way or something? And honestly, everything I've gone through was done for no good reason other than the love of the game. Hell, a third of the way through the season finale, she sold that Null Orb Uzi through harder than Raccoon sells merchandise just so she can make a dramatic entrance 30 seconds later.
Dropped this. Silly.
Absolute End is Sin's episode. Home and Mass Destruction were both good showings for her, but episode 8 is where she finally gets to cut loose, resulting in some of her best lines.
Okay.
For the entire first half of the episode, she's got her main duo either on the run, repairing themselves from Sin ripping them apart with her bare hands, or most of the time both. It's all N, Uzi, and V can do just to survive, and all the while, she's having the time of her life. I should mention at this point that this scene, dubbed Volway, is not only my favorite scene of the episode, but my favorite scene out of V across the entire series. It just gets everything right all at once. From V finally having a chance to apologize, to Sin being herself, to N and Uzi's worries over it possibly being a trap, the tension hitting record levels, and finally saving V, it just works. Following that scene, we see Sin deliberately take her time eating N's core, once again just to screw with V. Sin knew that V had no chance of stopping her, especially with Jay guarding her flank. What she didn't account for, however, was Khan completing his own arc, as I've gone over before. And she didn't account for one more thing that happened in Volway that might be the biggest drive behind Uzi reversing Sin's callback ping. I've noticed that following the action, the camera holds on this shot of Uzi for a few seconds. As I've said before, Dead End is the conclusion of V's character arc, but Absolute End is where the fruits of it are shown, and where V, for the first time since the episode 2 flashback, gets to be herself. It's a bit of a reach admittedly, but I think Uzi seeing this, thinking on it, and realizing she needs to follow V's example might have just been the crucial factor in defeating callback ping. I mean, just look at what she says next.
Sorry, just me in here. I think dumb things are frickin' cool, and
With that, we get the final fight, which misses a spot on my favorite action set piece of the series, only because Doll set such a high standard in episode 3. This was choreographed perfectly and animated beautifully, with it once again showcasing Sin having the time of her goddamn life. As the reign of the Absolute Solver concludes, though, we get into one final thing that really fascinates me about her. Despite her body count numbering at literally all organic life in the universe, we haven't even seen the full extent of her abilities. The only reason Sin lost is because she felt the need to get some fun out of her final fight with Uzi, though I think Uzi could have lasted a bit even against an all-out Sin, and because Uzi caught her off guard at the perfect time. And keep in mind, she did all of this in heels. Even trapped in Uzi's tail, Sin is still capable of causing a zombie apocalypse and turning Sparky into Godzilla. She seems content to hang out in the tail for now, but who knows what she'll do next. I love every second this Eldritch Goober is on screen. Even without the rest of its excellent cast and the many threats left unpursued, I'd want Season 2 for more Sin content, and honestly, I kinda just want to make some myself. In fact, looking at my channel, I already have. Sin's the main reason why I love Mass Destruction as much as I do. She single-handedly carries home out of the last place spot. She's the main reason, at least for me, why this show is such a blast in general. And she's perhaps the biggest contributor to Absolute End status as my favorite episode of Murder Drones. Also, please, Glitch, I know that Sin has been accepted as her main design for honestly understandable reasons, but please give us Made Sin merch and my life is yours! I'll admit this show is flawed. It's riddled with small issues, it has pacing problems past the first act, it throws too much information at the viewers at once for even me, the way it handles death is quite lopsided depending on the episode, Heartbeat and Home are relatively sour spots, the finale didn't explore the main cast nearly as much as it should have, and Brayden wasn't given anywhere close to as much screen time as he deserved. But I love Murder Drones anyway. My good friend Eclipse recently pointed out that there's a difference between good and fun, and while I definitely think Murder Drones is more fun than good, I do think it's both. The good far outweighs the bad in my opinion, and for better or worse, it's changed my channel's content forever. I am giving Murder Drones by Liam Vickers and Glitch Productions a Sonic Frontiers 8 out of 10. Not perfect by any means, but at the same time, it gives me hope for the future of indie animation unlike anything else that's ever been released. Sin content on this channel isn't anywhere close to done.
You look great. Have you considered a bow, though?